So we're gonna make an app, very simple app. I already have the basics set up. So I have my site is the project, and then I have my API, which so it's just gonna have a single resource, a single model, and we'll start there, and then we'll restrict it, and then we'll see how we can create a user and log in, and we'll do it all with Postman. All right. So we have my site. So I'm going to go into settings first, and I'm going to add. I'll add Django REST framework as an app. So and then I'm going to add this API app that I have made. And then in the URLs, I'm going to import include, and then send everything with API. Over to API.urls. And then in API, I'm going to add the URLs file. So here it's not really necessary since we have such a simple route, but I'm gonna use the default router from Django REST framework. This is not necessary. It's really kind of maybe silly since we're just gonna do one thing here, but from dot so we'll register a route, and this will be the slash whatever we want to have. In this case, let's do advice, and then we'll need to give it a view set, which we'll have to write. So from dot views import, this will be advice view set. So it doesn't really matter what our model is, but rather than just blogs and blog posts, we'll do something slightly different. It'll end up being the same thing. So advice view set. And then URLs, so URL patterns equals. Okay, so we have our URL patterns here. So now we need to go into the views. Oh, before we do that, let's go create the model. So this will be and let's see. Okay, I'll give it a string representation. Is there another E in genre? Okay. Okay, actually, I don't even know if we're going to use the admin panel, so that might not matter. Okay, so we have our model here. So just a single thing. We're not worried about anything else. Now we go into views and we'll import the model. So from and we'll have to import view sets. So from REST framework view sets import. We'll do the model view set. This is the easiest one. And we'll give it a query set. And then we also need to give it a serializer class, which we haven't made yet, but we will. Okay. If you notice spelling mistakes, please let me know. I'm a terrible speller. So from right, so now we will create our serializer. We'll import serializer from Django REST framework. Import model serializer. So we want. Need to double check. Yeah, I think model serializer will do it. Okay. And this will be model. Okay, so model will be device, and then we need, well, so the fields. So we have genre and body. Okay, so this is all the basics right now. Sorry for all that boilerplate. So we should be able to go to the base URLs here. If we go to /API, we'll get handed off over here. And then we have advice, whatever. And then our view sets can, we have our advice serializer. And here, we're not doing anything custom. So this is all just the default stuff. So let's see if this works. So we'll run migrations. Let's try just doing that. and advice. So we have this double slash here. So let me get rid of the slash. So slashes, I mean, this is a setting you can change, but okay. So now we can go here, we can view, we can create a new one. So yeah. That. So we have a resource. You can view all of them. You can view them individually. You can create them. You should be able to destroy them as well. So all this comes default by using the uset. So what happens if we only want logged in users to be able to see and create new advices? Well, the first thing we can do is we can go into settings, and Django REST framework has permission classes, and we can set, just like Django, has permission classes. So let's go to the API guide, permissions. So you can set the permission, a default permission policy for the whole application. You can set them at the level of a view. You can set them at the level of objects. By default, even though it's not explicitly stated, what you have is REST framework permissions that allow any. And this just means you don't need to be logged in to do anything. So we want to change that. We're going to change that to this. So in order to do anything on our application, you have to be logged in. We'll add that as a restriction. Let's try going back here. And now we get rejected. Detail authentication credentials are not provided. So now we can't do anything without being logged in. So how do we log in? Well, Django REST framework has a couple default ways of doing this. If we go to the documentation and look at the authentication, so there's basic, there's session, but we're actually not going to use session. We want to make sure this is outside of the browser. There are other things you can, if you want to worry about. This is slightly simplified, so we're not going to worry about CSRF tokens or anything like that. So we are going to use not basic authentication, but token authentication, which frankly is not really that much different than basic authentication. So first thing we'll have to do is we're gonna have to add this to our installed apps. So this auth token app is not, it's there, but we have to explicitly reference it. So here we'll add that REST framework auth token, and also need to change our settings. What's that example? So default authentication classes. So we have permission classes. Now we want authentication classes. We're going to get rid of the session token, and we're going to do okay. So now we have these two global settings in our project. Only logged in users can do anything, and we're going to use token authentication to make sure that a user is authenticated. So if we try to go back here, oops, server's not running. So we're gonna have to run migrations because the REST framework auth token is gonna do some stuff to our database. Okay, I just misspelled that. No comma. Thank you. That's why you have trailing commas. All right, run the server. Let's go back here. Okay. We can see that the header. So the way this authentication negotiation process works is I send the client sends a request, and then the server initially will respond with an unauthorized, and it will tell you what you have to do to authenticate. So in this case, it sends a header www-authenticate, and it says token. Sometimes you'll have a realm, but it's telling me, the server is telling me you can't come here unless you give me a token. So we don't actually have a token yet. We don't even have any users. So I'm going to go into the admin. I'm going to create a super user and go into the admin panel, and we'll create the user. Okay, I'm going to create one more user here. Okay, so now I've got two users, one super user, one regular user. And I have this other, you notice here, I have a tokens section. So I can actually create a token for each user. So I'll create a token for the super user. And here is my token. So what I can do with this token, so now that I have a user, I've gone in through the admin panel. We'll set this up so we can do it through the REST API. But for right now, we have a user, we created a user, and we created a token for the user. So now if I have this token, I should be able to go here. Let me get the correct route here. All right, paste this in. So I try to make a GET request. I'm going to get this authentication credentials not provided. So I need to provide it. It told me Yeah, I can look at the headers here. It's telling me here, it's sending me this header www-authenticate, and I need to use token authentication. So I'm going to add a header. I'm going to call it authorization. So this is an I didn't just make this up. This is a standard authorization header. And then token space, not what I had planned on pasting. And now if I make the request, I can actually access the resource. So what you have to do, and we're just going to do this in Postman for now, just to see how it all works. But in your front end, obviously, you'll have to keep this token somewhere. Local storage is the simplest and least secure option. You can also keep it in a cookie, which is I think the preferred way of doing it. But in either case, you're going to have to make sure that you have this authorization header with this token. So remember, this is all just strings. So we have this string token with a space and then our actual token. All right, so how do we actually set this up to where we can, if we don't have access to the admin panel, basically. So the first thing that, let's see, we set up the users. Let's do the getting a token. So let's assume that we already have a user here, because that one's a little easier. So I'm going to create a new app. I have API and then the project. So I'm going to create an accounts app. Okay. So I have an accounts app, and then on my main URLs, path. Okay, anything that goes to accounts will get handed off here. All right, URL patterns. So we will do, this will be get token. So the process will be, you'll have to be able to create a user, but once you have a user created, the user will have to access this endpoint to get a token, so that they can do any other future actions on the site. So it's basically like logging in, right? So you log in, you get your token. Once you have your token, you can use it. You send it in every request, and yeah. So we have get token. Now, Django REST framework has, just like Django has some built-in auth stuff. So there is something built in to handle getting a token. We could write it ourselves, and it wouldn't be that difficult. In fact, we can look at the source code real quick. So from REST framework dot auth token. Remember, this is the package that we had to explicitly reference in our installed apps. What's that called? Let's look this up. So looking at the source code here, REST framework, and then auth token, sorry. Auth token, views. And then here we have this obtain auth token view. So this, we could write this view or something even simpler than this, but this is already included, so why not use it? So we use this obtain auth token. Okay, so now we have this view set up. So this is assuming we have a user already created in our system. And so when you go to obtain auth token, oops, you can see from the source code, it's going to expect a password field and a username. So we will make a post request with a password and a username, and we should get a token. We should get the correct token back.
Does that need the .as view?
No, so that's a good question. You can see here it's actually being exported. It's not exported, but essentially this is what we're importing. So it's already called as view. All right, so I think that should be good. Let's run the server. And we'll try going to, let's do another one. This will be make a GET request. Not allowed to make a GET request. So we make a POST request. And it tells us we need to include username and password. So we can do that. Make sure this is JSON. Use my super user. All right, and we'll send this off. And that was a valid username password combo. So I get this token back. So this token, I can then use here, which I think, is this the same user? Yes, F3 something, yeah. So I can then use this token here to make authorized requests. So the process would be, log in, then you go to the token endpoint, you give your credentials, you get a token in return, then you use that token to access resources on your server. Okay, so we've got the last two steps. Now we need the first step, which is to actually create a user. And just like Django, for whatever reason, this is not included as a default thing, so we'll have to write this ourselves. We could also use, there are third-party options as well, but we can write this ourselves. So I'm going to create a sign up. And then sign up set. Actually, I'm not going to use view set. We'll have to import that. All right, and we'll have to create that. And we're gonna have to inherit from something, probably from REST framework. Use. Let's take a look. So there are a number of default views, generics. That's what it is, generics. And so our case, we're making this very simple. So the only thing we need to do is create. So we just need to make a post request. So you can use this create API view, which just does what we need it to do. So let's do that. Create the API view. And then we need to give it two things as usual. So we need to give it a query set. That will be we're going to use the built-in user model. So from Django dot models. Okay, so a query set, and then we're also going to need a serializer class, which we haven't made yet, and that will be sign up serializer. So let's create that. Import that. All right. So serializers. Now I have to import from REST framework dot serializers import model serializer. Again, there are several options for serializers. This one requires the least work, basically. And then the serializer class will have a meta class. And we need to tell it the model. And we'll have to import that. Okay, and then we also need the fields. So we'll keep it simple. So we'll just do username, password. Okay, so I think that should do it. So let's try creating a user. So authentication credentials were not provided. We're in a little bit of a pickle here. We can't access anything on our application without being logged in, and we can't create a new user unless we're logged in. So what we can do is leave the global default settings. So from here, the permission classes is authenticated. We'll leave that, and we can add to our view. We can basically add an exception to that. So if we go to our view here, permission classes, and this one will be allow any. We'll have to import that permission. So from REST framework. All right, so let's try that one more time. Okay, so it's still not a good request, but we are, we have access to the endpoint now. So let's try making a post request. Okay, we get an error. Okay, so let's try making that a slash. Okay, so now I have this username and password required. So I can add those. This is for a new user. So so we can see if this actually worked. So it looks like the request was successful. I made the request, I get back a status 201 created. So I would think that this would work. Let's go. Well, looks like Bob's in there. Unfortunately, there's a problem with the password, so Bob won't actually be able to log in. So I'm creating a user, but this is not really how you do it. So creating users is a little different than what you do normally. So we're actually going to have to customize the default behavior here. So you can see, let's go look at the create API view in the documentation, which doesn't really tell you much, unfortunately. Let's see. Looking for an example. There it is. Okay. So the following methods are provided by the, so it refers to these as hooks. So these are part of the life cycle. You can perform, create, perform, update, perform, destroy. So what we need to do is we need to override perform create, which is going to get our serializer, which is going to have all the information from our request in it. And then we're going to have to create the user that way. So let's override perform create. Okay. So perform create, we get the serializer. And just like, so you can basically treat the serializer as though it were a form in Django. So you can call is valid on it. So if serializer dot is valid, let me see if there's a note on this. Don't know if that's here. Let's see. Okay. Sorry. So on the serializer, just like a form, we call is valid. And once we call that, we get access to this new property called validated data. So that's what we'll do here. And then we'll stop and console log it. So print it. All right, so let's make a request, and then I think we have to create another user here. So here, this is an ordered dict, username, and password. So you can access username and password. So let's do that. Okay, and then once we have a username and password, there's a special method that you call with the user called create user. So you can't just create it like a normal thing. There's a special method that handles the password hashing. So we're going to import user yet again. All right. So
You need an E at the end of create and create user.
Ah, thank you. All right, so I'm going to try this one more time. So let's go back to the admin panel, and we'll make sure that these are both the users. Okay, I guess I didn't even create one. I'll refresh this, Bob2, and Bob2's password is good. So now that we know that we can create this user, Bob2. So let's go back and get his token. So we'll go here to the get token endpoint with Bob2 and his credentials. We'll see if we can get a token. We can. So we have Bob2's token. Now we go to our actual resource that we want to access. And we'll put this token, Bob2's token, in the authorization header. And it looks like it works. Let's see if we can make a post request. And I'll make a GET request here again. So that all works. So that's the whole system for using the built-in token auth. And if you use JSON Web Tokens, it's very similar. You'll just have to use some third-party stuff. But the basic process is the same, where you'll have to create the user. You'll go to a token endpoint. You'll trade your credentials for a token. Then you'll use that token in future requests. Any questions about any of that?
Will this video be available for us to look at later today?
Yes. Okay. So